All right. Well, before we get into the content today, just wanted to kind of give you guys a heads up on kind of class planning. I'm going to open up the first exam before too long. Um, Exams for this class are all online. Um, because they're online, they're obviously open note. They're obviously open whatever you want. I'm not going to sit your living room or your bedroom and watch you take the test. So you can use whatever resources you want. However, it is timed, right? So the test will have a time limit. Um, I do that so that you can't just look up everything, right? I want the test to still be at least somewhat relevant to evaluating your knowledge and evaluating your understanding, not just evaluating your ability to Google shit. So there is a time limit on the test. So I strongly recommend that you review your notes as if you were taking a closed book test, so that you can answer as many questions as possible without having to consult any other resources. But then if you get stuck on something, you can look back at your notes. Right? Your notes are going to be a lot more helpful than Google in this instance because um, the questions that I ask aren't something that you can just really easily type into Google and look up the answer, right? It's going to be stuff that's based on what we've discussed, stuff that we've addressed in the class. There's a lot of questions on there about how to connect different ideas. So those are things you're only going to get by actually like being in the class. It's not a test that you can just Google all the answers to. You're going to have to know stuff from class. So again, it's open book, it's open note, it's open resource. However, based on the nature of the questions and based on the time limit of the test, I would strongly urge you to study as if it was a closed book test. Right. So it'll make your life a lot easier. It'll definitely make your grade a lot better. So just a fair warning, I haven't decided when to open that up yet, but it will be coming soon, and I will definitely give you guys plenty of notice. When I open it up, I'll give you like a week to do it. But again, since it's timed, it doesn't mean, like you do 5 questions today and 5 questions tomorrow. It means you have a week to study, because once you open the test, that's it, right? Once you open the test is started, and you have, that 50 minutes to get it done, period. You can't close it out and come back to it. So I give you guys time to do it, but once you open the test, that's it, right? That's your only shot at it. Okay. So yeah, just kind of want to warn you guys that was coming. There will be a second test later on as well, but just kind of giving you guys a heads up, which shouldn't be a surprise. It's in the syllabus, but just in case y'all forgot, thought I'd throw it out there. Okay, so now let's get back into the content. Right, continuing on with our conversation about marketing, advertising, and public relations. We left off last time. We talked about some different types of advertising. We're going to continue that list. What are the different ways that advertisers get their message out to you, the loyal consumer base? Right. Along with, again, the interstitial and superstitial online, another very common, very popular form of advertising these days is what's called an advertorial. And an advertorial is an advertisement that's made to look like an editorial, right? An editorial is, from the golden days of newspaper where you would have people write their opinion. You'd have experts write their opinion on a subject that was for public consumption or for the public good. It was very clearly identified in a newspaper as an editorial. It was not to be confused with regular news content. It was clearly, opinion, right? It was clearly positional. Well, an advertorial is where you take that same kind of format, that same kind of look, but now instead of just advocating for this candidate or that candidate, you're actually creating an advertisement for something, right? You're selling them something, but you're making it look like it's the newspaper endorsing it, right? You're making it look like, oh, this is some expert in the field who wrote this column because they were concerned with your well-being. That's not what happened. It's not, some expert who's like, yeah, I think more people need to know about how good Tide is. It's people pretending to be experts, to try and use that kind of expert testimonial approach to advertising. It's deceptive, it's shady, but it is very successful because While more savvy, nuanced individuals like yourselves can pretty clearly tell when it's an advertorial, your grandma probably can't. And this is where a lot of problems happen in advertising in general is people who are not media savvy, people who are not native to these types of media and types of messages tend to confuse legitimate news with bullshit, right? And advertorials create a huge problem with that demographic. Another type of advertising that's again uh, raising its profile is subliminal advertising. Subliminal meaning just advertising that's not direct, right? Not explicit, right? Um, in the 80s, in the 80s, there was a lot of concern in popular music with subliminal messages in records, right? And even before the 80s, right? Like on a Beatles album, people were convinced that if you play it backwards, there's a message that says Paul is dead, Paul is dead. And then in the 80s, it was, metal acts were, being accused of convincing kids to do horrible things because of the subliminal lyrics in their records. The idea here is that a message is coming to you that's imperceptible, right? It's hitting your subconscious. So subliminal advertising is advertising that is kind of, again, not explicit, but it's kind of hitting your subconscious, right? Examples of subliminal advertising would be just simple references to products within content, right? So like you're watching a television show, right? You're watching Friends, for example, which you shouldn't because it was a terrible show. You're watching Friends, and in the middle of a conversation between Phoebe and Ross, Ross just throws out like blah 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 blah. Well, that's why I take Pepto Bismol to put up with you. That's subliminal advertising, right? That's putting that brand's identity out there and using it in a positive light, right? It's automatically inferring, hey, look, this brand is a good thing. It does a positive thing for Ross. Thus, it would do positive things for you, right? That's just one form of subliminal advertising. That's just one example. But that's the kind of idea is you don't even realize that it's there. It's just disguised as part of the noise of the scene. It's disguised as part of the content of what you're engaging in. Very similar to subliminal advertising is product placement, and this is something that people tend to be a little bit more familiar with. They've heard of this idea. Uh, Product placement is the idea that I pay a film company or a television production company or even a music video producer to put my product in their product to put my product that I'm trying to sell inside their video, right? Um, Again, it plays off of that idea of endorsement, right? Um, you watch a movie and the main character is drinking a Pepsi, right? And you can clearly see the Pepsi logo and you can clearly see the name of the brand, and right, that's just a real simple, real basic, hey, Captain America drinks Pepsi, so if you love Captain America, right? And again, you media savvy folk aren't going to fall for that bullshit, but there's a lot of people who are not media savvy and they really do think that way. That message really does come across of like, oh, I better use this product because this character I like really likes this product. It happens. It happens more than it possibly should, but it's a thing that exists, and advertisers have figured out it exists, and they figured out that it works, and so they keep doing it, right? If you guys saw the Fantastic Four movie that had Ian Griffith and Jessica Alba and Chris Evans and Michael Chiklis in it, right? The really shitty Fantastic Four movie from like, I don't know, over a decade ago. There's a scene in there where Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, goes to a motocross event, right? And the rest of the Fantastic Four see him on there on TV at the motocross event. And they go down and confront him because he's showing off and he shouldn't show off. And there's this whole scene of an argument between Johnny Storm and the Thing, Ben Grimm and Johnny Storm, and the whole thing is just a giant wall of product placement, right? They're arguing in front of billboards. Um, there's like 14, 15 different logos inside the every shot you get of that scene. Every single shot contains 14 to 15 corporate logos in it. I always joke, I said that one scene paid for the whole damn film, right? With the amount of advertising, the amount of product placement that got squeezed in there. Um, if you've ever watched the Wayne's World movies, which you should, they're before your time, but I don't care. They're recorded for a reason. And Wayne's World 2, they really take the piss out of product placement with like they've got just great bits in there about how corny and how absurd product placement could be in a movie. And it's a really well done joke. It's a really well done bit. Right. But again, it's a really simple idea is that especially it's effective on kids, you know, if they see their favorite character, you know, wearing this brand of shoes and it's identifiable, right? You can clearly see it's this brand of shoes. Kids are going to go, oh, well, I should wear those shoes. I want those shoes because this character has them. There's also behavioral advertising. We already talked about social marketing, right? And the idea of like how a brand is kind of attached to a community just by association, you know, like extreme sports is Red Bull and gamers are Mountain Dew and Doritos, and, right? Well, behavioral advertising is where I'm going to market based upon your behavioral patterns, right? Like, you know, if you're a runner, you need this, you know, and the way I approach that advertising is by connecting the product not to, let me rephrase that. I don't connect the brand to the product. I connect the brand to the activity. ASICS is probably a great example of behavioral advertising. ASICS is a shoe company, right? It's a shoe brand, but they specifically target runners, right? They want to be known as the running shoe company. And so as a result, you don't see ads for ASICS on, you know, the nightly news. You don't see ads for ASICS during primetime television. You see ads for ASICS only places where runners are going to be, right? So you see ads for ASICS not just in shoe stores, but in sporting goods stores. You see ads for ASICS in dietitian stores, right? Like those supplement stores. That's behavioral advertising, right? I'm not advertising my product, I'm advertising my brand and only associating it with this behavior. Viral marketing is another ethical dilemma that we're facing. A lot of people recognize these days that the goal of a lot of media is to go viral, right? That's what we say. It's going viral. That's a good thing. But we forget that the root of that, the reason we call something viral is because if it behaves as a virus, yes, the positive there is that it spreads without your work, right? You don't have to put effort in for it to spread. The downside is that it's uncontrollable. Right? It gets everywhere. It goes places you don't necessarily want it to be. So viral marketing just fundamentally is the idea that you create some kind of a marketing product, some kind of an advertisement that spreads on its own, right? And again, I've referenced this a few times in class where you watch a goofy commercial for Snickers and you think it's funny, so you send it to your friends or you repost it, right? Or you retweet it. You're now advertising on behalf of Snickers without getting a dime out of it, right? The goal of viral marketing is to just lessen costs, is to try and get that marketing out there, spread around as many people as possible while paying as little money as possible to get it out there. Again, it's proven highly effective because as social media becomes more and more prevalent, as social media becomes more and more dominant in people's lives, which hopefully that's something you guys recognized in your media usage diaries, as how much social media we all tend to use. as that becomes more and more prevalent, marketing is, excuse me, going to shift more and more towards, well, how do I get other people to share this? Because they're going to have a hell of a bigger reach than I will by putting it on television or putting it on, putting it in magazines. There's also native advertising, and this is probably the form of advertising we don't think of nearly as much as the others. We're constantly aware of, but just don't think of it as advertising, right? Um, if you buy a shirt, a T-shirt, and it's made by Nike, there's going to be a swoosh on that damn shirt, right? Not just on the tag, but like visible on the clothes as you're wearing them. There's going to be a swoosh there. That's native advertising, right? That's advertising on the product itself. When you buy a can of Pepsi, that can is native advertising in and of itself, because it could just be a white can with the word Pepsi written on it. But no, they got to do the full color spray. They got to have the logo on there. They got to have the branded a font pattern on there, right? The product itself contains native advertising. Just having the product reiterates to you the value of the product. Would I go in my fridge and I see all these labels looking at me, right? Looking back at me, that's native advertising. That's reinforcing, oh, that's right, this brand of milk is good. And I know it's good because I have it. So once I buy something, I'm still being met with the advertisements from that company for that product every time I go to use it, every time I go to look at it. Because again, you could save a hell of a lot of money on packaging if all you did was make a white box with the name of the product on it. But that's not going to appeal to anybody. That's not going to remind you of it every time you glance at it. That product itself is an advertisement. And again, we're constantly seeing it, but we don't think of that as advertising. We think of that as just labels. No, labels are advertising. No doubt about it. They are absolutely reinforcing that behavior that you've already engaged in and trying to get you to do it again, right? We want you to buy more of the product, so we need to make it very clear that this is the product you already have. A concept that comes up a lot in marketing and advertising discussions is something called a public service announcement, or PSA, right? But really a PSA is its own animal. It's something different than marketing and something different than advertising in a fundamental way. A public service announcement is advertising for a nonprofit entity, right? So advertising for an organization that isn't there to make money, right? A nonprofit entity is simply an organization that doesn't try to make a profit. They try to bring in only enough money to support their expenditures, right? So if it costs me $17 to make a widget, if I'm a for-profit entity, I'm going to sell that widget for $20. If I'm a not-for-profit entity, I'm going to sell that widget for $17, right? I'm only making back what I spend. Nonprofit entities are things like, humane societies, the Red Cross, United Way, colleges. Highland Community College is a nonprofit entity. You wouldn't know it by talking to some people who work here, but yeah, we're nonprofit. We're not supposed to make money. We are supposed to equal zero at the end of every fiscal year, not equal plus. We're supposed to equal zero, right? That's the whole point of a nonprofit entity. So a PSA is an ad for a nonprofit. Because they're nonprofit entities, they're very low paying. You don't spend a lot of money on creating a PSA. So if you're a media content creator, right? If you are somebody who creates media content, whether that be video, whether that be audio, whether that be print, and Friends Forever Humane Society comes to you and says, hey, we want to advertise in your whatever. They don't have a lot of money to give you. Right? They don't have a lot of money to spend on advertising. They're non-profit, right? They don't have an advertising budget. And as a result, doing those kinds of ads doesn't pay very well, right? If you're a video content producer and Friends Forever wants you to make an ad, you're not going to get a lot of money out of that ad, right? Just for frame of reference here, WIFR, which is the CBS affiliate in Rockford, they have every TV station has what's called a creative services department, which is the department that actually makes the ads on the TV station, right? The local ads. If you call WIFR and you want to advertise on their station, the lowest cost to advertise on WIFR is $2,000, right? That is the most affordable package they offer. And for that $2,000, they will produce a 30-second commercial for your business to your specs, making sure it meets your standards. And it will air, I think it's 5 times a week for a month. But it airs whenever they feel like it, right? You don't have any say over when it goes on air, right? So the cheapest package you can get is going to get you a commercial, and it's going to get you 5 plays a week, but whenever that is, right? Whether that's 3 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, doesn't matter, right? They're going to play it 5 times a week. So if you're a business, if you're a for-profit business, $2,000 is what it's going to cost you to advertise on television. If you're a nonprofit entity, you can't afford $2,000 a month. You just can't afford $2,000 a month on advertising. So instead, you might pay $500 a month for advertising, right? You might pay $500 to WIFR for them to do a commercial for them. Well, why in the hell would WIFR make a commercial for less money than they're used to getting paid for it? Why would they make a commercial for $500 if they usually charge $2,000? That's absurd, right? If you worked at a candy store and somebody came in and said, hey, I know you're selling that Snickers bar for 75 cents, but I only have a quarter. Do we have a deal? You'd say, fuck no. The price is the price. Get out. You can afford it or you can't. Go. Why would WIFR do that? Why would they take less money to do that work? Because they have to. Because they have to. They're required by law. Remember the Radio Act of 1927 we've talked about a few times, where the whole point of the Radio Act was to say, we will give you the airwaves for free, but it has to be for the public good. That is one of those things that has been interpreted as the public good. You have to, if you are running a television station or a radio station in the United States, you have to run a certain number of public service announcements per day. You have to dedicate a certain amount of time to public service announcements on your air. By law, you have to, or you lose your license. You lose your FCC license. So that's why they'll take $500 over $2,000. It's because they gotta. They have to run the ads anyway. Well, they can't run an ad if the ad doesn't exist. So they take less money and they do less work, right? There's no law that says it has to be a good ad, just that it has to exist, just that it has to be aired, right? So you don't put a lot of time and effort into it. You don't put a lot of work into it. You don't put a lot of hours into it. You make it because you have to have something to put on the air. That's why PSAs tend to be around for a very long time. You know, a for-profit company, they'll put out a new ad every 2 weeks, right? Every month. A PSA, they're going to be running that PSA for the next 4 years, right? They're not going to produce a new commercial for you every month. They're going to produce a new commercial for you every few years because there's no incentive for them to do it. It's you have to. It's like when your parents tell you to clean your room, right? You're not going to bust out the deep clean. You're just going to spot clean it because you have to. When you're forced to do something, you're a lot less motivated, which is why PSAs tend to suck. They tend to be really, really lame. The other advantage for a television station or a radio station is it's a tax write-off. Technically, that counts as a donation to that nonprofit. If I, Jim Yeager, right, if I, as an individual, make a commercial for Friends Forever, right, If I make an ad for Friends Forever, my normal rate as an individual is I typically charge $150 an hour for video production work, right? So to produce that ad is probably going to cost about, yeah, I'd say $1,500, right? It's about $1,500 to produce a 30-second PSA for Friends Forever. I'm not going to charge Friends Forever $1,500. They're not actually going to give me $1,500. Instead, when I go to do my taxes, I say I made a charitable contribution, in-kind contribution of $1,500 to Friends Forever. I didn't actually write them a check. I did an in-kind service. I donated $1,500 worth of my services to this charitable organization. Thus, that's $1,500 of my income that doesn't get taxed. As you get older, as you make more money, tax write-offs are going to be more and more important to you. Trust me on this one. You're really going to give a shit about tax write-offs eventually at some point in your life. If I can show that I have given enough to charity, then my taxable income rate is lowered. I pay less taxes if I make more charitable contributions. This is something that nonprofits use to their advantage. I know Highland uses it to our advantage all the damn time. When fiscal year is coming to an end, you can go to these big money donors and say, hey, you want to reduce your tax burden? You want to reduce the amount of money that you owe to the IRS? Make a contribution to us, and that reduces the amount of taxes that you have to pay to the IRS. It's a great little loophole, isn't it? Right? It's a great little motivator to get people to give to charity, is to say, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to tax you as the government. I'm not going to tax you for the money that you gave to other people. So one of the ways that nonprofit entities can get their PSAs made is by saying, hey, I can't give you money, but I can stop the government from taking more money from you. Yay. Right? So that's why content producers will make PSAs. They're not going to make a lot of money, but it is going to stop them from having to spend that money elsewhere. How do we regulate advertising? What are the rules, right? The governmental rules of advertising? Well, they ain't much. I tell you that. the regulation of advertising is minimal at best. In fact, the regulation of media in general is pretty fucking minimal. The American media is really a libertarian's wet dream, and advertising is right in there with it, right? When it comes to regulation advertising, it actually depends on what we're regulating is what we have to look for specifically and who we look for specifically. One government entity that regulates advertising is the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC. The FTC, these are the people who busted Martha Stewart, by the way, right? If you're like, why did Martha Stewart go to jail? It's because the bastards of the FTC, they were jealous of her souffles. The FTC monitors and regulates business practices that are anti-competitive and or deceptive or unfair to consumers. You can be deceptive to competitors, but you can't be deceptive to consumers. So if your advertising indicates that your business practices are anti-competitive, or they're unfair to consumers, or you're lying to consumers. If you're lying to consumers, the FTC can step in and they can A, pull the advertising, B, fine you for that advertising. Or both, right? They can pull the ad and make you pay for it. But only if you're lying to consumers, right? If you're deceptive in your business practices, it doesn't really matter unless consumers are affected by it, right? That's the whole premise here, is that the FTC is only concerned with is your potential customer base being duped. So if you put out an ad that um, claims that your competitor's product kills everyone who uses it, that is anti-competitive, that is deceptive, and that is unfair to consumers. If you put out an ad that says, my product will cure cancer, no, no, you're deceiving your consumers. It's unfair to your consumers. The FTC will fine you. They will pull the ad. The FDA, or the Food and Drug Administration, is another entity that regulates advertising in the United States. What do? Well, they monitor and regulate the claims made on food labels or packaging, right? So the nutritional guide, the ingredients list, but also any advertising claims that are made on the label itself. Remember, we mentioned native advertising, the idea that the packaging of the product is an advertisement for the product. The FDA monitors that and they regulate that. If your juice says 100% juice on the label, but on the back, on the ingredients list, it lists a bunch of things that aren't juice, well, then it's the FDA's job to regulate that, to step in and notify the manufacturer, you can't do this, you have to fix it. Also, you have to pay us this money because you did that thing wrong. If you advertise on your packaging that your food is gluten-free, but it isn't actually gluten-free, then the FDA is the one who steps in and makes you suffer consequences for that inaccuracy. However, you can get real fucking tricky about this stuff. You will oftentimes see packaging that says fat-free or sugar-free, but the product is not fat-free. It is not sugar-free. My favorite example of this is cooking spray, right? Like Pam cooking spray, you spray it on a sheet so your food doesn't stick to it, right? Pam is aerosolized fat. That's all it is, right? That's the whole fucking point, is it's a spray can of fat. And yet the bottle, the label says fat-free. If we use layperson understanding of those ideas, then that means it's an empty fucking can. But it's not, right? You shake it up, you spray it, there you go, there's shit in there. So how can it be fat-free and yet be 100% fat? How? Because fat-free doesn't mean 0% fat. It means parts per million of fat is beneath a particular level. It doesn't mean there's no fat. It means the fat is low enough that it wouldn't register on a particular scale. And because saying virtually fat-free isn't really a good marketing strategy, instead, they're able to just say fat-free. So when you're going to the store, when you're looking at a product that says fat-free, sugar-free, gluten-free, really what you should be reading that as is basically fat-free, virtually fat-free, for all intents and purposes, gluten-free, but it's not actually fat-free, sugar-free, gluten-free. It doesn't meet the minimum threshold that they require before you can take that label off. And then there's the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. Bastards. Yeah, Michael, if Harry wants you to do an STE, man, do an STE on the FCC and how fucking useless they are. Tell him I said that. For years, I've wanted somebody to do a speech on the circuit about the fucking patheticness of the FCC. They're the absolute definition of a paper tiger. They look so fucking nasty, but they don't do their damn jobs. They're fucking jerks. Hate them. They're fascists. They're butt heads.
I do have to do I actually am going to do a speech entertain at some point, so I'll consider it actually.
Seriously, I will write the outline for you. Like I'm so, for years I've had this stewing in my brain. You tell Harry that I said you have to, and I'm on Harry's tenure committee, so he has to do what I say. So the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, right? What do they do with advertising? How do they regulate advertising? Well, they monitor and regulate the appropriateness of the advertising, right? So their only concern when it comes to advertising, the FCC's only concern is, does it show boob? Does it say fuck? That's it. That's all they're worried about is, would this be offensive to a child or someone with a mentality of a child? Right? That's their only concern. You can lie your ass off, but if you don't swear, you don't say anything sexually gratuitous, and you don't show anything gratuitous, the FCC doesn't care. All they're going to monitor and regulate is the appropriateness of the advertising. So you look at this list, right? You see that there are 3 federal agencies that have the power to regulate advertising. That must mean advertising is really well regulated. Wrong. Not even close. Because there are 3 different agencies, unrelated, they're all federal, but they're unrelated. They do not communicate with each other. They are not engaged with each other. They do not work together. They are completely separate, gigantic, bureaucratic entities. And because of that, it allows more shit to get past them. Because if you, as a consumer, notice that, wait a minute, this food packaging is mislabeled, is the average person going to know who that complaint goes to? Fuck no. Even if they guess, they're like, oh, maybe the FTC will, like, oh, well, this is a business practice, so I'm going to send it to the FTC. Well, if the FTC gets that complaint, they're going to go, oh, yeah, that's not our department. They're not going to take the complaint and then forward it to the FDA. They don't give a shit. That's not their job. It is entirely dependent on consumers and consumer advocates to know which agency is responsible for this particular, infraction. And furthermore, it is on the heads of consumers and consumer advocates to not only know where that goes, but to stay on top of the complaint and make sure it moves forward. Because these are giant bureaucratic institutions, complaints disappear and fall through the cracks all the time. And so it requires motivated, engaged individuals to make sure that that complaint is being heard and is being carried through. And the number of motivated and concerned individuals is getting smaller and smaller by the fucking moment anymore. Advertising is regulated on paper, but very, very minimally regulated in practice. Very minimally. It has to be extremely egregious before any of these entities is going to step in and do something about problems in advertising. Extreme. Like, you need to show a whole ass naked butt before the FCC is going to get off their ass and do something about your advertisement. You need to flat out say this drug cures cancer before the FTC is going to say something. So as a result, advertisers have really a lot of leeway to do shady shit when it comes to advertising. Before I talk about the business of advertising, that's probably better to wait until Monday. We'll do this on Monday. So we'll end it there. It's 10:40. We'll just stop there and pick the rest of this up on Monday. So just to kind of recap from the beginning of class, don't forget, I will be opening up exam 1 soon here. Haven't figured out when I'm going to open it, but before too long. It is open book, it is open note, it is open internet, but it is timed. Once you open it, you have to finish it. You cannot close it and come back to it later. You get one crack at it. one bite at that apple. Study for it as if it was a normal in-seat closed book test, but know that you have the ability to look shit up if you can't remember it on the spot. That's the idea here. I don't want to make this test something that you can do without ever paying attention, but I also don't want to make it something that, you can't possibly do well at given the circumstances that we're in. So that's the compromise I've come to. That's the middle ground I've got here. Okay. Again, I will let you know when I open that exam. I will let you know when it is due. I will reiterate it over and over and over again. But just be prepared, be aware. As the syllabus indicated on the very first day of class, there are exams, and I will be opening that first one up before too long. Okay. All right. Hope you guys have a good weekend. Try and behave yourselves. Try and be good. I know that's hard.